whose ADP is the farthest from reality. That more this week on the couch. Always happy to be joined by Evan Silva. Evan, when I say whose ADP is farthest from reality, what name pops into your head?
Christian Kirk. And I'm rolling out team previews right now on establishthorun.com, and the Jaguars were, I think, the second team that I analyze, and I go through every skill position player, and the metrics that are predictive line up for him pretty well. If you're expecting Trevor Lawrence to take a second-year leap, which I absolutely am, Urban Meyer was completely incompetent. Doug Peterson, I think, is going to be more than competent. I think that he's an interesting bet for Coach of the Year. Trevor Lawrence is still 80-1 to win MVP. But I think that either way, even if they don't hit those benchmarks, Trevor Lawrence is going to ascend in year two. I remember we had Matt Waldman on our show last year. He was comparing Trevor Lawrence to Andrew Luck from a skill set standpoint. We had Matt Harmon on the Establish the Run podcast a couple of days ago. That show's not out yet, but he was talking. He's a fan of Christian Kirk. He thinks that Christian Kirk is underrated. And I know that people get caught up in the contract. Obviously, he's overpaid, but that doesn't really matter to us in fantasy, because I think that the stars you can see how the stars can kind of align for Christian Kirk at age 25. He's still really young for Trevor Lawrence to ascend and for him to bring Christian Kirk right along with him. And then the target competition isn't very fierce in Jacksonville either. Marvin Jones is kind of on the back nine. And I think that Christian Kirk, the arrow is pointing up on him.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where we put a bookmark or a placeholder on this Jacksonville offense because, Evan, we have offenses Giants, Bears, offenses that were rowing against the coaching. But this is a little different with Urban Meyer. People I've talked to, as I've said a few times, you could be the biggest Urban Meyer hater, and it was probably worse than you think. In Jacksonville last year, it was really bad, about as bad as you could imagine. It was not an environment for any players to develop or grow. And Doug Peterson is almost the opposite of that. Really, just like Dan Campbell was a good chaser for the Matt Patricia era, I think that Doug Peterson is bringing it all back. The question is who's going to benefit. Christian Kirk, kind of like Corey Davis last year, right? Not necessarily a number one, paid like a number one. Corey Davis, that's a whole other topic about ADPs. But like you said, is it maybe Marvin Jones? He'll certainly be the best red zone target, I think. Zay Jones, who they really like. Laviska Shenault, who's an interesting redemption story. And then you have Evan Ingram, speaking of redemption stories. You have Travis Etienne. So we're going to see who's going to have buzz, because this is going to be a much more fertile environment for fantasy football success than last year, which drug everyone down to the bottom of the ocean. Since I mentioned the Giants and the Bears, are you fascinated with those offenses on the same idea that not only does it have to get better, it could get a lot better?
Giants, I think, more so than the Bears, because I just the way that they built the offense and built the team this offseason, and there have been murmurs that the new regime is not all in on Justin Fields, and the way that they built the offense, they really didn't build the offense. So kind of aligns with that theory that Ryan Poles, who did not draft Justin Fields,
right,
that he may not be all in on Justin Fields. Of course, he's going to say that publicly, but the way that they drafted, the way that they built their free agency plan, and I understand that there were a lot of restrictions coming, from the previous regime, which really, really struggled. But I don't have a whole lot of optimism from that. I still think Justin Fields could be good in fantasy, and I love Darnell Mooney. But we're talking about they're thinking about starting a fifth-round rookie from Southern Utah at left tackle.
Right.
They were potentially going to start Dakota Dozier at right guard, and he's already on season-ending injured reserve. Mm-hmm. And the other guys haven't been very good either. So I have more optimism for the Giants. I think that the way that they built in the first year of their new regime, a lot more promising.
I agree with that. The Bears, there's just too many personnel issues. You mentioned the line.
Mhm.
Tevin Jenkins isn't even on the first team. They took him in the
Right.
second round last year. So it's bad. The offensive line is an issue. And there's a lot of things. Man, I hate even bringing up Dwayne Haskins now. May he rest in peace. That story's so sad.
Yeah.
So very sad. But it's a little reminiscent, and there's things I can't necessarily mention, that Haskins falls down the board. Not every team was sold on him. And I think we saw not every team was sold on Justin Fields. I'm not saying that I'm comparing them as players as far as weaknesses and strengths and their trajectory, but let's see, because as you said, it doesn't seem like the new regime was hired with some sort of condition. Well, Fields is going to be your guy. You have to build around him. You have to build an offense around him. So there's a lot of question marks there. And the Giants, on the other hand, you have the alignment coming from the Bills, and you have some stuff to work with. Let me ask you this, because I sometimes have to do a reality check on myself here. Am I wrong to be, and we're talking 2 quarterback superflex leagues, but maybe not just 2 quarterback superflex leagues. Am I wrong to be a little fascinated with Daniel Jones now? It feels to me like no one has anything to lose here, right? And the Giants don't have anything to lose by getting him to play aggressively, leveraging his outstanding athleticism and running ability. If you squint, kind of looks like Josh Allen, right? Big, rugged, fearless. He's got arm talent. He's faster than Josh Allen, who's pretty fast for how big he is. And I think there's something there. Or is this just one of the situations where, hey, they signed Tyrod Taylor, so that should let you know how long they think Daniel Jones is going to last?
I think that Daniel Jones is a guy to be on the optimistic side of this year. I have him as the quarterback 18 overall. He's got that dual threat capability. I think he's got enough in the weapons core, and they got the bookend tackles now there. I love some of the shots that they took on guys on the interior too, like John Feliciano, guys who have gotten guys blocked in this league before. Like, they have not been able to block people up front for years with the Giants, and now I think that they might be able to get some guys blocked, and that's going to be important. You expect the pass rate to go up for the Giants because of Brian Daboll's background. And so, I'm on the optimistic side of Daniel Jones. I drafting him as my quarterback 2 in a super flex or 2 quarterback league. Like,
yes,
I feel very good about that.
Yeah, well, and again, we talked about Justin Fields as that Konami code. What's up, Rich? Maybe it's Daniel Jones. Certainly, this team and Brian Daboll both have experience using a running quarterback to give advantages to an offense. And again, there's no reason to keep Daniel Jones in bubble wrap. This is a prove it year for him. If you were to put a chip, well, I'll ask this: are you in the second round Saquon Barkley club? I mean, this is a big question. This might be one of the 10 most important questions as you go into your draft.
I know.
Where do you fall?
I'm not. I don't know if he's good anymore. I mean, he hasn't been like a legitimately good running back in the NFL in years. I mean, it wasn't just last year.
Right.
And I remember him coming out of college, and the way that he played early in his NFL career, he was a boomer bust runner. He was very agile laterally,
right?
Great lateral agility. But then he would be able to stick his foot in the ground and get vertical, and that's how he could rip those 60-yard runs. But I don't see him putting his foot in the ground and getting vertical like he used to. And so you take that long run capability away from him, and all of a sudden, like, he's just getting stacked up at the line of scrimmage consistently. Now, there is a positive picture that you can paint, and that is, hey, they start to use him way more in the passing game,
right?
With the higher pass rate under Brian Daboll. They don't ask him to run between the tackles like he used to. Maybe the offensive line that it's improved can give him more lanes for him to get vertical. But I don't know if he's that vertically explosive like he used to be. Did he lose that? Can he get that back?
Right.
I'm going to let somebody else take a chance on that in the second round.
That's fair. And I think you're right to point to for optimism when Saquon Barkley says, I haven't been moved around this much since college, right? There's a certain sense with Jason Garrett and then whatever you call that offense they had last year, that the Giants were kind of like if you give like your 4-year-old little brother the controller in Madden and it's just mashing buttons and it didn't have any cohesion. It didn't have any sense of how to maximize player skills. We could talk about Kenny Golladay here. So as a pivot from Barkley, because I know I actually have an answer to this, but who is your favorite second round target? Because I know you were high on Aaron Jones in the first round last year. Now you can get him in the second round. There's some really interesting wide receivers in that round. Mark Andrews is off in there. Is there anybody that's starting to emerge as your favorite second round target?
I mean, I'm back on the Aaron Jones stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at his splits with and without, historically with and without Devontae Adams on the field, and there's a decent amount, 7 or 8 games worth of data there. I mean, they run the offense through Aaron Jones. You know, and then you look at everybody's trying to sort out, oh, could it be Sammy Watkins? Could Christian Watson, step up and, make an impact as a rookie? Alan Lazard, we're talking ourselves very much into Alan Lazard right now. But what the answer is just Aaron Jones. I think that there's a pretty good possibility that that's the case. I mean, he's a really good player, like real freaking good, and historically, Devontae Adams got so much love in the red zone. I mean, in scoring position. And I think that A.J. Dillon certainly will pick some of that up. But, I mean, they've been willing to throw Aaron Jones like fades in the end zone. I mean, he can do it all. I think that he's like 95% Alvin Kamara is kind of the way that I've described him in the past. And, I mean, I think now is the chance. Now is the blow-up opportunity for Aaron Jones. And I love getting him in the second round.
You mentioned Alvin Kamara, and we're doing our team previews too, Evan. We're doing the preseason watch list, and I got to the Packers backfield, and it is the answer Jones or Dillon. Why not both? Why not both?
Yeah.
You mentioned Alvin Kamara. Why can't this be another Kamara Ingram backfield? Not the 2021 version. A backfield where Dillon is like a third round value, maybe late second round value, because he's gobbling up the touchdowns in games that they win. He's closing out the games. He's still getting enough receptions, enough to give you that 8-10 point floor every week. But then Jones gives you those blow up weeks with 7 catches for 89 yards, in addition to a rushing touchdown or what have you. And they could both be hits. And additionally, Alan Lazard could be hit. I think in general, if you look at the cumulative ADP of the Green Bay offense, fantasy football crowd's a little too low on it. I think they're expecting some sort of drop in the same way that they're expecting a drop in Kansas City. But the overall tactical value of Devontae Adams was not the same as the tactical value of Tyreek Hill. And I think Aaron Rodgers has shown us, like you said, there's a big enough sample size, 7 games over the last 3 years. The offense doesn't take a hit. The team doesn't take a hit. The team's actually been just fine. Beat good teams on the road. I'll say this, people get tired of hearing me say it, but Aaron Rodgers is going to be fine. You just have to decide which parts of the Packers offense you want to be in on. You see, you're doing team previews. Go ahead.
And if you take a macro view of the Packers, you zoom out and look at, I think their defense could be freaking awesome.
Oh, front
and
7.
They play in this terrible division. The Vikings are kind of rebuilding. The Bears are going to be bad. The Lions are kind of they're interesting.
The little train that could. The little
franchise the little train that could. But I mean, they're still, with their sportsbook win total is no higher than 7.
Right.
So the Packers are going to be able to control games. I mean, they should be able to control games week in and week out, and that would bode well for both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, totally. This is also, if you're going to fade Aaron Rodgers, you may fade him because the Packers might just be too good. They might only throw the ball 24 times a game. Their front 7 is just ridiculous. They have, and they draft 2 more players in the first round from that Georgia defense. They're just taking pieces of the Georgia defense and put it in their already very good defense. And with the money they freed up, not signing Devontae Adams, they were able to keep Devondre Campbell. They were able to keep this offense. They signed Jair Alexander to an extension. So this team, and one of the most important thing is no fantasy football implications here. They got Rich Bisaccia. What was the most important thing for them to do this offseason? Fix the special teams.
Yeah.
And they did it. So, yeah, there's some optimism there, although I want Lions fans to be optimistic. Okay, what's something else standing out as you're doing team previews over at Establish the Run? What's something else that is you're doing all these comprehensive workups maybe surprised you as you're putting it together?
It's just how bad Ezekiel Elliott was last year. We're looking at stuff from Sports Info Solutions and PFF, and and other stuff. Like, just, it was such a bad year. And he was really bad as a receiver, really bad as a receiver. And I understand that he played through a PCL injury, but I just think that he's kind of veering into that late career grinding power back, and he's not the versatile asset that he was earlier in his career. And look, I understand the guy can pass block, I mean, big time. The coaches love that, and the ownership is obviously tied to him. They want to make it work because of all the money that they invest in. I mean, they had to lose some key players really because of that contract this offseason. I mean, they lost Randy Gregory. They had to move on from Amari Cooper. So, I mean, I understand that they want to make it work, but Tony Pollard was so much better in every category last year. And it's just, I don't think it's going to happen right out of the gate, like weeks 1, 2, 3. I mean, I think they're going to give Ezekiel Elliott September to show, and then that's when you have the fresh legs as an older back. But I think that the pendulum is going to really start to swing toward Tony Pollard if there is continued inefficiency. I mean, the coaching staff is going to have to do something about it because they've lost a lot of explosiveness on offense. I mean, Michael Gallup probably ain't going to be there for the first 4 games. Amari Cooper's gone. They're going to need that level of explosiveness that Tony Pollard can bring, and Ezekiel Elliott certainly did not bring last year.
Elliott is a player I actually just spent part of this day thinking about because the Scott Fishbowl's going on. I got him in the 7th pick of the 6th round. Okay. I didn't have a running back 2 yet. And the Scott Fishbowl system that gives points or half a point per first down helps Zeke. And there are some different competing interests here. Like you said, the franchise, Jerry Jones, is going to push him on the field. He's still going to be the goal line back. He's still going to be their top line back going into the season. But we know Tony Pollard is better. The best answer I could give as I'm talking myself into taking Ezekiel Elliott, which I did, is that he had that PCL that they mismanaged, right? He had a torn PCL. And sure enough, and you're right. I mean, there's 2 potential stories here. One is that he's going to be fine for the beginning of the season like he was last year. He came out of the gate slow against Tampa, who runs the ball against Tampa? Nobody. And then he was strong after that. He was strong against the Chargers, the Eagles. He had 143 yards against Carolina. He had 110 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Giants. And then his efficiency drops off a cliff. It could be age, and he certainly is one of the more overworked running backs. And it could be the injury, could be a little bit of both. Tony Pollard, I want to have hope for. I want to. And I want to see in training camp whether they're using him more out of the slot. But the biggest thing you said as I'm getting ready to do the NFC East preseason watch list is I think you're right that the whole pie for the Cowboys could shrink. And some of the different pieces of that, as I was putting together my Cowboys takes, are there's the offensive line. Okay, they don't have a left guard. They're going to try to have Tyler Smith. They're going to try to coach up Tyler Smith, their first round pick, to play left guard. Hopefully that works. This isn't an offensive line that we're used to going to training camp saying, hopefully that works. Hopefully Terrence Steele is a good right tackle, right? Hopefully Tyron Smith stays healthy.
I mean, Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, these guys have like 20 plus years of experience I mean, they're getting old. And Tyron Smith, that's a bad bet. We know that now that's a bad bet.
Yeah. So where does that leave an offense that, I'm sorry, I'm rooting for Dak Prescott, but he looked like that Jason Garrett's still in his ear last year, especially in the playoff loss. He doesn't look like his radio is tuned in to the game where he is using the players he has at his disposal to defeat the defense. He looks conservative out there. And what happens when you're conservative and then the defense compresses everything? The defense isn't afraid of the bind that your running game and passing game puts them in. We'll see. I think it's Philadelphia's year in that division, honestly.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can't, Evan, and I know
their roster is just loaded. I mean,
and they have coaches that I trust. That's the other thing. So maybe you can help me tap the brakes here, because we've been doing this together for a long time, Evan, and I'm much more prone to flights of fancy, just going off the reservation on things, getting carried away. I like getting carried away, and you'll come back to something verifiable, something that you can point at and measure. But I feel like every time I look at the Eagles offense, I like it better. Every time I look at the Eagles offense, my idea of a ceiling goes up, or maybe I can't even see the ceiling. Am I getting carried away?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Pro Football Focus, they did their offensive line rankings. They had the Eagles number one. Um, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, like Dallas Goedert. They did nothing to upgrade their running back room. That makes me like Miles Sanders as a potential bounce back candidate. It's just ridiculous. The guy scored 0 touchdowns last year. That's got to be bound for some positive mean regression. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I understand Jalen Hurts. It can be, it can be up and down. It can be an adventure at times with him. But I mean, you want to talk about fantasy though? He was consistent 18 plus points almost virtually every week last year, and now the supporting cast is there. I mean, it's going to be real interesting this year with Jalen Hurts. I have him above Patrick Mahomes right now in my fantasy quarterback rankings. I mean, the sky is the limit for him just from a statistical standpoint.
Right. Efficiency spike, massive efficiency spike coming. Because that's the thing. Evan, in AJ Brown's first big year, how many targets did he get? I don't know off the top of my head. It was like 100, right? 110.
Yeah,
I mean, he's going to get
many. Yeah,
not many, right? And so he can be a fantasy wide receiver one in a low volume offense. Dallas Goedert, it's tight end. The bar is even lower. Look, I'll absorb a 2 for 29 from Dallas Goedert if the next week I get 4 for 140 and a touchdown. If I'm not taking one of the top 5 tight ends. And you mentioned Miles Sanders, and I want to know what you think about this because I'm so confused about how to proceed because I like Miles Sanders too. I think Miles Sanders, as I usually try to sum him up, it just has never quite come together for him.
Right.
There's an injury or fumbles or something just when it seems like he's on the cusp of doing it. And he has some plays, a la Saquon Barkley. And he's similar to Penn State, right? He's similar to Saquon Barkley in the sense that his physical tools exceed how well he can apply them with football skills. But you see games against tough defenses. I know he did it to the Steelers where they'll stack him up, they'll bottle him up, and then he'll break a 70-yard run because he's just that physically talented. And he is a good receiver out of the backfield. But what do you do? Because this is something we haven't seen before. We have seen players say, take me in fantasy. We've seen coaches say, take this player in fantasy, like Nyheim Hines this year. But we haven't had a player yet say, don't take me in fantasy.
No, I think it's because he's just tired of the shit. Like,
right?
He's tired of the shit. And I don't blame him. I mean,
frustration.
People tweeting at players is just outrageous. Like, please do not do that, and because you don't want him to hate fantasy. I mean, like, it's cool that like Austin Eckler has like completely embraced fantasy. That it's super cool. And I think that's, endeared him to a lot of fans, but it pisses off some players, and I don't blame them.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but then we look down no Jordan Howard this year. Fingers crossed that they don't bring him back because that could be detrimental to Miles Sanders' scoring upside. But I mean, I think you look further down the depth chart. I do want some pieces of this offense, primarily in the running game, because it's just that the math doesn't always add up for the target. Even though you present a compelling case, there's still some, the math doesn't always align, but the math aligns for running back or for running game production.
Yeah.
And I like Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, he showed that he could play in the passing game last year. This will be his second season. We kind of know what Boston Scott is, and Boston Scott is a good football player, but Kenneth Gainwell more upside, I think. And I'm going to take him in the late rounds as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting part of the draft for running backs. I feel like the running back dead zone is alive this year. I feel like in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, you can get a running back 2 who maybe will give you running back 1 weeks. And it's just a question. I think the either or in the 7th round is probably Miles Sanders or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So since I brought him up, what's your temperature check on Edwards-Helaire right now? You're on mute. You're muted right now, Evan. There we go.
Okay. I really wanted to be in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, I think that you could build the case that, injuries and injuries and some hard luck and have kind of derailed him early in his career. I'm not so sure that he's maybe the talent that some people thought that he was coming out
The
of
Chiefs thought he
LSU.
was.
The Chiefs, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to be on when they re-signed Jerick McKinnon. It just gave me a little caution, because Jerick McKinnon was freaking good last year. I mean, he was like the main back down the stretch in like critical moments,
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more cautious than I hope to be on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because I thought initially you could build a pretty good case for him. That this would be kind of the year that he would take a leap. No Tyreek Hill, lots more opportunity in the offense. It's weird how he was like one of the best receiving backs in like the history of college football.
Right.
And they I mean, you don't see him throwing screens. I mean, to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, Travis Kelce, I think, has more screen passes than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You think back to the old Eagles offenses like Brian Westbrook,
right,
catching screen passes to LaShawn McCoy. Where has that been with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? It's been kind of strange to me. But I'm with you, though. I mean, there's definitely a certain place in the draft where I'm willing to take him. And one thing that has really stuck out to me, and I've built a lot of Chiefs stacks so far, is just how stackable that team is in comparison to recent years, because Patrick Mahomes is not going as high as he has in recent years. He will consistently slip to the 4th and 5th round in the drafts that I've done. You could start out with Kelce in like late 1st round. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's starting to creep up, but I mean, he's still very draftable. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 7th, 8th round. MVS in the 9th and 10th. I mean, even McCole Hardman, 12th, 13th. I mean, it's just a very, very stackable offense. Ronald Jones, I think, is more interesting this year than he has been in years past when he's had a lot of hype on him, because I mean, like, it was never going to work with Tom Brady and Ronald Jones. I mean, that was never going to work, right? Because the guy can't do anything. I mean, he's a good interior runner, but like that, he can't do any of the little things well. Will that be as big of a deal in Kansas City? I'm not sure. I mean, the dude can run the football.
Yeah. Well, inside, I mean, he gives everything.
Inside.
He gives everything. He also is not necessarily assignment sound, and the fumbles or otherwise things that get him on the wrong side of someone like Tom Brady. Maybe it will not be a problem. That's the thing. It does lead, the roads do lead back to Jerick McKinnon or Isaiah Pacheco or something like that, because neither Edwards-Helaire or Ronald Jones, who were both drafted by their teams to be cornerstones of their offenses, have lived up to that. And you're right that Kansas City's offense is more stackable. I'm fascinated by Valdez-Scantling simply because he's the one who could get those deep targets. Although when I look back at Kansas City last year and in previous years when they had Hill and Kelce, nobody was a consistent third option. There was nobody. They would take turns. Pringle would have a game, DeMarcus Robinson would have a game, Hardman would have a game. And I wonder if it's just going to be like that, but with Kelce getting like 200 targets instead of 150 or 160. Mahomes is going to be resourceful, but I'm not quite as confident in Mahomes to keep this offense as efficient as it was as I am in Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, you want to
Travis Kelce. I mean, just what is the ceiling on him this year? And I understand like he's starting to get up there a little bit in age, but you go back and watch. I mean, I don't think that his play on the field deteriorated really at all this past year. I mean, he keeps himself in incredible condition. I mean, what's the earliest? Let's say not tight end premium. What's the earliest that you'd be willing to take him? I mean, I have him like number 8 overall. Right now. I mean,
I'd be willing to go that high.
He plays the onesie position. You wouldn't be willing to go that high?
Oh, I would be. I would. I mean, I was willing to go that high before. And here's talking about ADPs that are far from reality. I don't think that Mark Andrews should be anywhere near Travis Kelce in drafts. I think there should be like a 2-round gap.
Well, it's weird because if you're building tiers, you feel like they should be in the same tier. But then when you're actually doing like a ranking, I mean, I've got Andrews in the 20s,
right?
Kelce at 8.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a big difference. That
Right.
means that Andrews, in auction terms, Andrews is only worth about half as much as Kelsey, right? Like if you pay 30 for Kelsey, you should only pay about 15 for Andrews. And I think that's actually accurate because number one, Andrews' spike weeks, mostly all but one, I think, came with Tyler Huntley and Josh Johnson, not with Lamar Jackson. And what you have here with Kelsey, Andrews, and Pitts are three tight ends who are going to be the top receiving threat for their team. But there's a big difference. Mahomes and Kelsey, I compared it with Cecil this morning, Evan, to like Malone and Stockton, right? I mean, Mahomes and Kelsey just have their two-man game. It doesn't even matter. There's no scheme, there's no approach that's going to really thwart them from doing their two-man game. It's unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
and that's what we had. Like, I mean, that's special. That's
right.
like what we had with Rodgers and Devontae Adams. I mean,
exactly.
Russ Wilson and Tyler Lockett to an extent. You know what I mean?
Right. Or even Doug Baldwin for a time.
Where they just riff. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
And Jackson and Andrews.
I mean, we saw like in the playoffs, like Kelsey isn't even like running the designed routes.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? It's
right. Yeah. So, but that's not Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, right?
Yeah,
when you think of Mark Andrews, he's not making plays on the individual chemistry between the two of them. He's making plays on running routes against a stress defense that's trying to account for an 11-on-11 running game and Marquise Brown's ability to stretch the field. So what's Mark Andrews going to look like? Now, maybe he just gets a preponderance of targets like he did with Tyler Huntley and Josh Johnson, but I'm not convinced. And then with Kyle Pitts, it's Marcus Mariota. You know, there's not even any chemistry there to begin with. And we already saw defenses last year, and as a rookie, they were willing to devote extra resources to Kyle Pitts. And that was with Calvin Ridley out there for half of the year. So I just think that Kelsey, I almost feel like if you're going to go early at tight end, it's got to be Kelsey. Andrews at Pitts at ADP. I'd rather just wait another round or two and get Kittle or Waller, because I'm not so sure that Kittle or Waller in a lower volume, higher efficiency role won't be better for fantasy than Andrews and Pitts in a higher volume, lower efficiency role. But I guess since we've opened up the can of worms here, tight end, Evan, if you're not getting one of those top five, and we mentioned Dallas Goedert already, I endorse that because I endorse any Eagles pick. By the way, I want to mention on the Eagles real quick, Kennedy Brooks. There's a Matt Waldman favorite. If anybody holds off Jordan Howard from rejoining the Eagles, it's Kennedy Brooks who could be that guy, the touchdown guy, the grinder, someone to remember there. Maybe not a true James Robinson, but a UDFA to a rookie year contributor for sure. Other than the top five at tight end, and we talked about Dallas Goedert, who are you gravitating to as early tight end targets in your draft plan?
Just kind of letting the draft come to me. You know, I mean, I'll take any of these guys. I just took TJ Hawkinson, I believe the 7th round of Scott Fish. The later round guy that I've been talking myself into is Irv Smith, with all of the signs pointing to the Vikings really, you know, they're going to increase their pass rate significantly from the Mike Zimmer era under Kevin O'Connell. I mean, that's probably my favorite late round tight end. Albert O. I thought that Albert O was going to have like a 4th round ADP by now in tight end premium. But no, his ADP has not gone as high as I anticipated that it might. And I get, Greg Dulcich is there. He's a route running tight end,
Yeah.
But he's also a rookie. And I mean, when do rookie tight ends really do anything? That's a struggle. There's a lot to learn for a tight end to get on the field as a rookie. Albert O has like all the talent in the world. Russell Wilson, this division, I mean, there could be a lot of shootouts in this division, And Albert O is he's the premium red zone target, end zone target on the roster.
Yeah, I think the Broncos, if you're going to pay close attention to reports out of any training camp, the Broncos are near the top of the list to see how this all sorts itself out. Sutton, I think that the fantasy football community is getting the memo that Sutton at least is the presumptive number one. Write it in pencil, not in pen, but he's the presumptive number one. We'll see about Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick I want to see, talk about ADPs out of touch with reality. Tim Patrick's ADP should be a lot higher. He's the starting wide receiver in this offense. KJ Hamlin's probably not going to be a a factor early in the season, that's even a question. Are they going to go with more 3 wide sets or 2 tight end sets? Because they do like Greg Dulcich, and then that implicates Alberto. But we know that we like Russell Wilson. And I'm with you on Irv Smith. I'm with you on Minnesota. Jacksonville, Giants, Bears, we already talked about as ding dong, the witch is dead kind of offenses. But Minnesota, you get that feeling from the Vikings players, right? That they're relaxed and happy to be playing in an offense that's going to Justin Jefferson. When Justin Jefferson says, "Where basically whatever Cooper Kupp did, I'm doing." Oh, I'm listening. I'm listening. You know, one of the things I mentioned this on our preseason watch list show. Justin Jefferson's rookie year was so good that the only name that we could mention him with was Randy Moss, right? And then he was even better in his second year, and no one even noticed. We didn't even act like it was remarkable that someone who had an all-time great rookie year actually took a step forward in year 2. What's coming in year 3? I wouldn't say someone's crazy to take him number 1. If someone says, I've got the number 1 pick and I'm just feeling Justin Jefferson, we may 3 weeks into the season say that was brilliant. That was a brilliant move. Because everybody's excited to play in that Vikings offense. I think if someone says, I'm just going to wait for Kirk Cousins at quarterback, that could also be a brilliant move because this offense could be a lot better than the last time we saw it. It was pretty good because of the pieces they had, but obviously it wasn't being deployed in an efficient way. I want to ask you real quick.
You want to talk about a fun team to write up.
Sure.
You know, there are some teams that it sucks to write them up, right? It's it's a drag.
The Steelers.
But yeah, exactly. The Vikings are like the most fun team to write up. I mean, I think I like Adam Thielen, you know, is like, he's not fun at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a total like conservative pick, but man, I mean, 6th, 7th round, like,
sure.
I mean, you want to talk about quarterbacks and receivers that have riffed. I mean, this guy scores a lot of touchdowns every year because that's who Kirk Cousins is looking for in the end zone. I mean, and that's not something to dismiss. I mean, and Adam Thielen is still a good player. He's more of a possession receiver now than he was earlier in his career. But I mean, he's a cheap middle round pick that could absolutely produce like a high end wide receiver too.
The interesting thing to watch there will be Irv Smith, like you said, who was going on a touchdown tear the last time we saw him. So, and maybe there's enough for both. Since we're talking about fun teams, and I'm really on the bandwagon, the Lions optimism bandwagon. I know you said actually I would take that over on 7 wins for the Lions. That's a whole separate conversation.
I think it's 6.5 actually. Still.
Yeah, take that.
I'm on it. I'm on it.
So, you know, you mentioned Adam Thielen. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in a similar part of the draft. You mentioned TJ Hawkinson being someone you're open to. I know DeAndre Swift has now risen to the point where you have to take him in the 2nd round, which is a little rich for me, but it may work out.
I've seen him. He's starting even to get the back end of the 1st. Like,
which, I mean, I dig it as a chip on the Lions offense because like you pointed out, and I think a lot of people, what you did, Evan, is you right up front said about the Giants, the tackle combination they have, right? The Lions offensive line is outstanding. It's another reason to love the Eagles. The Eagles backup offensive line is better than the Steelers starting offensive line. Don't get me started. The point here is that the Lions have a lot to work with on the offensive line. They have a brilliant, bright young mind calling the shots that the players are excited to play for, especially Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they have a plan. The war room, whenever it was Chris Olave pick number 11, they had a plan about stretching the field. They went and got DJ Chark. They have a plan. I'm excited. I think this offense could take a big step forward. But this, again, because you're rooted in the Midwest, in the Great Lakes region. Is this just me trying to give some people something to be cheered up about? Because once the season starts, they won't be.
No, I'm with you, man. I mean, I took, like I said, I took the over on their win total. I took Dan Campbell at 40-1 to win Coach of the Year. They're not a bad team to write up either. I wrote them up, and you know, they have like vertical like field stretchers on the outside whenever Jameson Williams gets up to speed with him and Shark. And then like there's going to be a lot of open grass in the middle of the field, and Jared Goff can rip it in the middle of the field. I mean, you know, he did a lot of nice things with Cooper Kupp with the Rams. Obviously not as much as Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, I think we've kind of learned like he's a teammate elevator.
Yes.
And I think that that Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown absolutely developed chemistry last year. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown had double-digit targets in each of the final 6 games last year.
Right.
And I know that the seas kind of parted for him. Hawkinson was banged up. Swift was in and out. But I mean, that kind of stuff matters. I mean, and I think that can extend into the next season. I mean, you just feel comfortable throwing the football to a guy. This is like a very real thing. Like, I've talked to quarterbacks, at different levels and been like, do you feel like a true on-field chemistry with a particular receiver? And they're like, of course. Of course there's a guy that I trust way more than the other guys. You know what I mean? And that stuff absolutely can translate into fantasy, and it does every single year. I really think it's something that we should talk about even more. I know you guys do a good job of it.
Yeah, man.
Because some people feel like it's hard to quantify that, but it's really not.
Oh,
you can see it in the box score.
That's exactly what's being quantified.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's the thing. Well, it's trends, right? I mean, in fantasy football, and I'm not saying that I don't fall prey to this. In fantasy football, or in lots of different things that are like fantasy football, where you're trying to predict the future, unless you have a really compelling reason, don't bet on trends to reverse. The trends are right there telling you, look at the direction of the arrow, okay? Amon-Ra St. Brown did this as a rookie. And yes, I like the way you put that the seas parted for him, but it was in part because of the new offensive coordinator. And this is another thing why I like the Eagles, why I like the Lions, because I trust their coaches. When Dan Campbell says, Anthony Lynn, you're a great man, you're a great leader of men, maybe you're not our best offensive coordinator during the season, and takes Ben Johnson, basically his protege, and says, let's see what you can do, and the offense takes off, I'm interested. And I trust this offensive staff in general to react to the information they're getting, right? I trust the Eagles because halfway through the season, they reinvented their offense, and it worked. We've never seen that before. So I think these are things that, like you said, are seemingly hard to quantify, but if you actually look at the direction of the team and you look at these things, they're right there, the forest, right, instead of the trees. And you do get, with the quarterback wide receiver chemistry, a feedback loop. Success begets more success, and failure begets more failure until the light just goes out, right? So you always want to look at those kinds of things. Narrative street, baby. I mean, these are things that you get from quotes. These are things you get, the shower narratives and things like that. But it actually matters. Like you said, you talk to the players, it actually matters. Real quick, we're going to go off the rails here momentarily, but just real quick, give me a name you have in your back pocket for the 18th round. Who's one of your favorite guys that's just I want him at the end of my roster to see what happens?
Jeez. I mean, we talked about him a little bit more already, but Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah.
Jameson Williams.
Right.
He's pretty cheap. Not really 18th round, but
sure, he's worth waiting for.
Yeah. I don't know what to do with Isaiah Spiller, but I mean, if he get the chance, I don't know what to think about him, because I remember him in college. He was such a good college player, but then he flunked the combine, and then he falls to the 4th round. But if somehow something happens to Austin Eckler, I think he's definitely better than Josh Kelly and Larry Roundtree. I mean, those guys are going to be fighting for a roster spot. It sounds like they've already made their minds up that Isaiah Spiller is going to have at least a little bit of a role. But I mean, that offense can absolutely roll. I like the way that their offensive line is coming together, and I mean the arrows just continue to go up on Justin Herbert. So Isaiah Spiller I think is a real nice late round pick. Not 18th round, okay, but
sure,
10th, 11th, 12th.
Yeah, and the Spiller thing, like you said, Kelly, a shank of a pick. Roundtree, well, he was always kind of a utility guy anyway. So it's the same regime that wasted picks on those guys. But at the same time, Spiller showed us some stuff independently, I think, that we liked. And we'll see. He and Rachaad White are both really fascinating in redraft because they have enough value to at least be a desperation flex buy injury week, save your bacon guy. But if the guy ahead of them goes down, and come on, I love Lenny. I love playoff Lenny, especially. Is he going to play 17 games this year? I don't think so. I don't expect that he will. is Eckler. I would love it if he plays 17 games, but both of those guys have both the injury upside and some week to week value depending on the matchup and things like that. So I like that. Go ahead.
Here's a good actual 18th round pick.
Okay.
And Mo Alie-Cox.
Yes.
I think because I've been wanting him to happen for a couple years now. He grades out right. First of all, he's fun to watch play.
Yeah.
And he like has gotten his yards per route run on Pro Football Focus, which has been pretty predictive for pass catchers. Like it's been good every year. He can block. The coach, he plays a lot. Like he has like good playing time numbers, like 40-60% every week, but they don't call plays for him to throw him the football. But could that change? No Jack Doyle.
Right.
Kylan Granson didn't really do anything last year. They did draft two guys, Jelani Woods and Andrew Ogletree. Jelani Woods is obviously interesting for his athletic prowess, and he caught a lot of passes last year. But he's a rookie tight end. So could this be the year where they start calling some plays for Mo Alie-Cox? They got Michael Pittman, and I kind of like Alec Pierce, but nothing beyond Michael Pittman that is proven and trustworthy in the pass catcher core. And again, they have trusted the coaching staff, the Frank Reich coaching staff has trusted Mo Alie-Cox to play a lot. It's just they don't get him the ball.
Yeah, this one's interesting because again, much like Minnesota, there's so much optimism in Indianapolis about the offense. Just that breath of fresh air with Matt Ryan. You hear it in the players. You hear it in the beat writers that, wow, when we watch practice, it looks like an NFL offense. The ball gets out on time. It's on target. It's such a look that is different for us. And that means Michael Pittman is really interesting in the third round. Nyheim Hines, again, folks, I know I like scat backs. I have a type, whatever. It's one of my blind spots. But when the coaches keep saying, we've got to use this guy more. And like you said, Evan, the other side of the equation is there's a hole in the passing game. It's going to be a better passing game, a more efficient passing game. And who's going to fill the vacuum? It could be Mo Alie-Cox. I like Brevin Jordan late too, if we're talking about late tight ends where you can tell a story where they really work out. But Mo Alie-Cox, I love that you let off with he's fun to watch, right? Fantasy football still, at its essence, one of its most important things is it gives you a chance to be part of greatness. It gives you a chance to be part of something, to get a little contact, buzz off of something great that someone does. And when Mo Alie-Cox is on the field, a lot of great things can happen. All right, let's go off the rails, man. Let's go off the rails. I've actually been asking this question. I'm going to ask this question of all the old guard. We were once the new guard, Evan. We're the older guard now.
I'm looking at the background right now, and what a great picture that was and still is.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's a long time ago.
It was, I think, 10 years more. I don't even know.
I think more.
So, and I know we've both been kicking around these parts for over a decade and a half. What is your favorite thing about how the fantasy football world has changed since you started?
It's certainly that it has just become so much bigger. And I think I think also the acknowledgement from a lot of people that like fantasy football has actually been the number one driver of the NFL's success.
Not just a driver, the number one driver.
Yeah, right. The number one driver. And that there has sort of started to be some acknowledgement of that, because at one point that was not, fantasy football was like looked down upon. Fantasy football, what are you, some kind of like a dork? No, like we actually like know the game like pretty well, and can apply numbers to the game. And there has been acknowledgement like from Sean Payton, guys like that, like they know that the fantasy football community is like a real thing, and that it has had such a big impact on the NFL success. That, again, the biggest impact, greater than anything else.
I dig it, because when we first started interviewing beat writers 15 years ago on this show, 16 years ago, I was careful to not say fantasy football. Some of the questions I would ask would obviously be fantasy football questions, but I did not want to say fantasy football because that felt like taboo. We were the children's table, and like you said, we were Dungeons and Dragons with football players.
Right.
And now I think that fantasy the fantasy football world, I think one of the things the fantasy football world does for the NFL, in addition to just driving interest, is we ask a lot of questions. We ask a lot of questions. And it's the same kind of questions I think teams ask about what meaning you can find in data, about what drives success, about what causes failure. We're asking all the same questions I think that teams are asking. And I think, like you said, there's a lot more overlap. And it's cool. It's cool that we're not the children's table anymore. We're at the table. And like I said, coaches will directly address fantasy football. Beat writers have to be fantasy football fluent.
That's exactly right. And actually, the best beat writers cover their teams like almost from a fantasy football lens. Jordan Renan does a really good job. Nick Underhill, does a really good job. Mike Sando was really the first guy that did it at the old Tacoma News Tribune.
Yep.
It was Matt Mayako.
Yeah.
I got to meet him at the Combine this year. But yeah, I mean, the best beat writers are the guys who cover it almost the way that we cover, our game.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fantastic. Okay. What is your least favorite thing about how the fantasy football world has changed?
I don't know. What's yours?
Well, I think, all right, I'm actually going to be honest. I think that with the expansion of the space and more jobs or more money-making opportunities or more opportunities to get clout or otherwise use something as a springboard. Whereas, when you and I started out, Evan, the idea of a full-time job in fantasy football was silly. Yeah. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Is we decided to try to be full-time fantasy football analysts when it didn't exist. If there's a lesson here, folks, it's take risks. If you're smart enough to try something before everyone realizes it's going to be a thing, then you just have to be there. You just show up. That's like 90% of it, right? But now it's oversaturated. It's not just saturated, it's oversaturated, that's a redundant, but I'm trying to make a point here. And I feel like what's projected in the conversation is more certainty and less curiosity. I feel like there's more conclusions and fewer discussions. I think there's less enjoyment of the interaction, and even the sword and shield. Mike Clay and I used to bang away on each other's shields with our swords on Twitter, right? Back in the day, because he was coming at it from the numbers perspective, and I'm the mayor of Narrative Street. But it was always with. But it was like
I worked with him. He worked for Roto World for a while, and like Westling, who comes at it came from a little bit more qualitative. They would bang heads. Like Westling thought that Clay was like too into the numbers.
Accountants do it by the book.
Exactly.
Right. So, but at the point, there was always such a high mutual respect, and I think we learned a lot from each other. And the idea was, I'm clashing with people that I respect because I want my assumptions tested by the best, and I want to know if Mike Clay is. I have a saying now, by the way, Evan. I don't know if you heard this one: death, taxes, and Mike Clay. That's it. That's the saying. Death, taxes, and Mike Clay. It's fantastic to see his success at ESPN.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
On this occasion this week, I think that Matthew Berry announced that he's. Well, we'll see. We'll see what Matthew Berry's going to do. So I just feel like it's not as much fun. It's not as playful. I think everybody's got an angle. I think everyone's got an agenda now. And when everybody was just tickled that we could do this and call it a job, it was still fun. It was still playful. That's probably my least favorite thing about how it's changed.
I think I would probably agree with that.
Okay. What else? I don't know. I hinted at this when you and I were texting earlier. I watched a ton of baseball this year. My wife is like full on in the deep end for baseball. I think the 9-year-old stepson has been in like 5 baseball leagues in the last year.
Wow,
and
that's awesome. Oh, that's right. When I was in New Orleans, like you were taking him to a baseball thing.
Yeah, right? It's awesome too. He threw the ball 62 miles an hour. It made he's not.
Go.
Yeah. We got we got some pitching talent, right? We're gonna have to learn a lot. First you get your fastball location, then you get your changeup, and then you just build from there, right? And my wife, it's so much fun. Like I don't know if you've seen Topps Bunt, the app Topps Bunt. It's basically baseball cards, but they're digital, and they have contests where this is where all the fantasy space is going, right? Where the cards you collect are the players you can put in your lineup. So it's an incentive to collect cards. The rarer the cards, the higher the multiplier on the points and things like that. So every day we put our lineups together, and it's fun. I mean, baseball, the tapestry, the layers of baseball are fantastic. I'm just going off on a soliloquy here. Really, what I'm going to ask you is, but I'm not sure if you've seen O'Neal Cruz. Should O'Neal Cruz be a quarterback, a tight end, or a wide receiver, or all three?
Yeah, he's the 6'7" shortstop, right?
Right, who throws the ball 97 miles an hour. He had the fastest throw by any infielder in Major League Baseball, and he's also one of the fastest runners on the team. So it's exciting to be a Pirates fan. How's your season? I know you have season tickets for the Cubs.
Yeah.
How's your personal experience? We know the Cubs are, they're at the inflection point. We'll see. They finally won the World Series. But how's your personal experience as a Cubs fan going?
It's all about my kid. Because
That's awesome.
a couple of years ago, you couldn't go to a baseball game. You could go sit in the rooftops, but it's like friggin' $400, and we did it once, and we're probably not going to do it again. It's not a great viewing experience or anything like that, And then last year, there were still like limitations. So I was just like, we're doing this year. We're going to get these tickets because I want my daughter to love sports.
Yeah.
And she does. I mean, she watches the game. She watches every pitch. They hit a home run, she knows what's going on. She goes nuts. Like if they win, which they don't win very much, it means so much to her. And it's crazy because we've probably been to like 16 games, and they're like 13-3.
That's
the
awesome.
Games that she has attended, and they're bad. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
right.
I don't know what's going on with that. There's probably going to be some mean regression coming, especially after they trade away Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ, which everbody thinks that they know
it's coming. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Chris Morel when we were texting, and that's her favorite player.
Awesome.
He's got a chance to win Rookie of the Year. She's met him a couple of times. We have like a great spot like where we sit for her to get autographs. She's got like 3 Chris Morel autographs. Chris Morel actually knows her because she wears these bunny ears. And so she he recognizes her. But it's all about the kid.
Yeah, right. This is something, and I'll keep mentioning these things. I mentioned some things over and over again on the couch, but I think these things are worth saying and worth reminding. I know down here in New Orleans, people are mostly concerned with teaching what they know to the next generation, whatever it is. Not making money off of teaching it, just teaching it because you want to be part of a chain, a link in that chain. And I was talking to somebody else who said, yeah, I think that's kind of when you become an adult, when you realize that. And one of those things is love or passion for things here in the world. And boy, that's an easy one to share. That's an easy one to pass on and enjoy the ritual of passing it on. And I just love hearing that your daughter is known now to the team and has a personality, a persona that they see her out there. Because that's one of the fun things about baseball is you can't come out to the park 81 times in a season and really get that feeling like you're part of the team. And it's not about how many games the team wins or loses. In the end, it's about what you get out of that great experience. And there's some fun players on the Cubs. We this year real quick, we got to go to the Tigers Yankees when Miguel Cabrera was at 29.99. He was at 20, and he didn't get a hit in the first 3 at bats. He came up in the 4th at bat, and the Tigers were tied with the Yankees 1-1, and there was a man on second and on third, and Aaron Boone intentionally walked him.
No.
And my wife said that she really thought there was going to be a riot. Like she really, really thought that like people were going to start coming on the field and like just tearing the Yankees limb from limb. And we got a good Yankees suck chant going. Always a good Yankee suck. Now my 9-year-old stepson is.
God,
sometimes
good.
Evan, even if we're like we're feeling a little friction, it's be like, hey, Yankee suck, hey, Yankee suck. It's like we're good. Yankees suck, God, watching the Yankees lose to the Reds last night, that was fun. Watching Clay Holmes implode. Anyway, and the Yankees lost that game because right after the intentional walk, Austin Meadows hit a blooper into the center field. So that was almost better than he hit 3,000 the next day. And then this coming up in August, we're going to go to the Lou Whitaker jersey retirement night. So
wow, that's
it's
awesome.
cool, man. Baseball, the giveaways.
Blue Whitaker and Alan Trammell, right?
Yeah, right. The Keystone combination. I mean, that was it. I mean, that was second base, shortstop combos. That was it. Hey, I don't think we're Blue Whitaker and Alan Trammell to any extent, but it's always a great time when we get together, when both me and Evan get together, but also all y'all out there. You make this a wonderful thing for us to get to do, to get to call work. It's getting exciting. Fishbowl draft, everything's getting ramped up. In a couple of weeks, there's going to be training camp news. The fire hose is going to be on. Establish the Run Football Guys. Our whole fantasy community is going to be there for you folks because you are so very classy.